info, I guess.
Okay, so hello, I'm Steven Haberman. I'm going to talk a little bit about Tessell, which is yet another GWT framework. We have a few of these. I'm partial to this one. Hopefully you'll agree. We'll see. So I'll give a little bit of history. Hopefully I won't take too long because this can get kind of boring. Oh, right, and I have animations for transition. So yeah, so we developed Tessell at Bizo. We do online advertising for our largest, it's not AdWords, right, but it's bigger analytics application. We started around July 2010, really inspired by a lot of the I/O 2010-ish, presentations and best practices in MVP, that sort of thing. Yeah, Ray Ryan and all of this. It was awesome. We were trying to do it kind of before all of the stuff in GWT itself, activities and all of this. So it was frustrating at the time. And so anyway, Tessell was what came out of that. Tessell's had 231 releases since then, about one, actually that math may not be exactly right, but basically it's been actively developed since then. We're still using it and enjoy it. It has two main goals: automation of MVP. MVP gets, I think, kind of a bad rap that it's a lot of boilerplate, which it is. I think the way most people do it by hand. Tessell tries to make that not suck. And then data binding. Data binding is like the rich models, rich properties, two-way binding between views and JavaScript objects that a lot of kind of the cutting-edge JavaScript frameworks are doing these days. So yeah, so those are the two main goals. It's not, I should have learned how to pronounce this before it's on the slide. Whatever this, yeah, the sushi sort of referral.
Is that Japanese? Omakase?
Yes, there you go. That this is what David Hansen guy refers to Rails as. Rails is whatever this is, which means it has everything out of the box, right? Tessell does not do that. It technically has a GWT dispatch style RPC sort of action result sort of thing from 2010, which is awesome. You don't have to use it. It's fine, you know. It has a pre-activities in place implementation, also optional. You can use it if you want. And it has various sort of annotation processors, GenEvent and GenDispatch. I think some of this might be in GWT P2 now these days. I'm not sure. Again, you can use that if you want. It's optional. But those are kind of not the main things. And so yeah, it's not an entirely out-of-the-box framework, which I think sometimes hurts things because things like Rails, people do really like that, right? Where you run one command and all of a sudden you've got a huge, or not a huge app, but a good infrastructure with everything the way you need it to do. It is something you still kind of piecemeal together. Yeah, so the main thing it does is automation of MVP. So my gripe with manual MVP is that you're writing this UI XML file and you're like, oh, I add a new UI field, right? Like, okay, now I get to go add that to my GWT view, and I need to go add that to my interface. And now I also need to, well, and depending on if you're doing testing, might add it to a mock or stuff. And so like every change to your UI XML file, you're repeating at least one or two or three other times, which really is not very fun. And then they also usually use the characteristic interfaces, right? So your interface will return has name or has text or has, whatever. But then, which is good for testing if you're doing sort of manual testing with mocks or something like this. But if you're doing, then you want to change two attributes about a field. You have an input element and you want to change the style, and the value or something like this. Now you have two methods in your interface. And so again, you're kind of repeating yourself quite a bit. So the main thing that Tessell does is it generates all of this from the UI XML file. UI binders actually, I don't know if they meant this when they were designing it, but it's really quite nice in that it has all of the type information inside the file to completely drive the GWT view from it, right? All of the UI fields are typed, all of the widgets, have a prefix that is their Java type's package name. It's really quite nice. So Tessell has a code generator that does that. And then it also, to get around this characteristic interface, it has isXXX interfaces for basically all of the GWT widgets. So if you use like a GWT text box in your UI XML file, since we're code generating it, we don't know whether your presenter is going to want like a has text or a has style or whatever. So we have an is text box, which is all of those. So whatever your presenter needs, it's going to have. We also make a stub that we'll get to later. And I'll show this. I think I have like 2 more slides, and then I'll get to showing the demo. But that's the big kind of productivity win. The other is data binding, which is kind of this 2-way view model binding sort of notion. It does this. Oh, yeah, and it has like an out-of-the-box binding sort of DSL for binding your model to your view. That is pretty cool. And it does this with we've been talking a lot about this whole observable notion that's going into JavaScript objects or JavaScript. Right now, it does it with kind of the more traditional rich property objects, a string property, integer property, and that sort of thing. It is kind of nice to kind of, have these as first-class notions, because now each of your properties, besides just being some key value in an object, you can have validation rules on them, you can have state on them about, which ones have been touched in the user interface, so that you should be running the validation rules on, and that sort of thing, and derive values. Oh yeah, and in the kind of the DSL is you get to start having a lot of declarative UI logic. I don't know what that was. Getting started. Well, we'll do the demo first, and then maybe we'll come back to getting started. So for the demo, everybody hopefully knows the to-do MVC sort of app, right? That is ubiquitous for JavaScript frameworks. I have the same sort of thing for Tessell. And so here it is running locally. It is here running locally. There it is. And this is actually kind of slick. I had done it for the original 2D MVC, and then they had a new version for their 1.0 or whatever. And the CSS and styling for this actually looks really nice. They did a good job. But it's this basic app where you add to-dos, and you can do a checkbox over here. And so you're seeing things change as I check. It's kind of slow, but then the item left is updating, and the clear over here is updating, and then you click this button, and it makes those two go away. And like you can double-click this to add more content, and then you can. I should look at this because it's not as laggy. You can delete it. So yeah, so I'll just kind of step through how most of this works. So I thought I'd start out. I took their template, which is kind of one big template, and split it up into a bunch of smaller UI XML files. The first one to look at is the app UI XML.
First.
Sorry.
The delay.
The delay.
Yeah.
If we zoom in the camera, we can see it better over there.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe you should just watch over my shoulder. Wow.
Wait, is it delayed?
Yeah.
I might have to rejoin the Hangout. Maybe I'm not sure.
That's
It's frozen. I think it's frozen. Like you've basically been kicked out. And
I could.
That's really hard to
Let's try re-inviting him. To
Looks
the
like
Hangout.
Japanese.
Can you just exit and come back?
Whoa.
We got
I
inception.
will
Oh, it's
try.
working. It came
It
back.
could be.
It's just
I know
slow.
that quit
Oh.
directory thing.
That wasn't too bad.
Yeah, why don't we go back? Maybe we'll just try.
I think it puts it.
Wait, what happened?
It puts it right at the current directory.
Does it just not like?
Do you have it maybe set just to display the one window?
No, it was the desktop. Oh, there it is.
So the desktop is. Oh, you wanted to see the desktop, so you have
Yeah.
to flip to. Yeah,
It's there now.
yeah.
Okay.
Full screen mode. I think that was getting confused.
So I have a app UI XML. So I'm also going to go look at my is app view and drag this over here.
Crazy. And basically something is created, and then the
Oh, that's
compiler
not
is
too
going to
bad.
go to compile it whenever it tried to
So,
compile, basically. It's
Hopefully what
busted.
you will see.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got my UI XML file over here and my interface over here. So the idea is that every time I change the UI XML file, I'm going to change this from root to root 2. There's going to be a code generator that runs down here in the console, and it's going to update the app, is-app view over there on the side. So you notice that all of my UI fields, there's the root, there's the header placeholder, the main placeholder have methods in the interface on the other side. And it updates automatically. So, besides the is-app view, there's also a GUID-app view,
I have to be here today, right?
which is the same thing, except for this is all of the UI binder boilerplate that you usually have to write by hand, which is
2:30.
Still there.
when it shows up.
I'm really
Well, anyway, it is the UI field, for base style, the UI field for HTML panel. Yes, there it is. This is all updated as well. Every time I change it, if I go back and take out the root 2, you're going to see that it changed back to root. And it tells you down there at the bottom what's changing. So this is fairly interesting insofar as, yay, I get to write my UI XML file and not have to maintain this large GUID app view, which is nice. And then what's interesting is that now if I go look at my app presenter, we'll look a little bit about, I think we can close these over here. The way it looks is, all right, here it is. So up at the top, you can't see, and I'm not going to scroll because it'll take too much time, but for a super constructor, we make this new app view, which is a static method that, when we run the GUID app, will be the GUID app view, but when we do testing, will be something else. We've got a bind method where I'm just kind of adding, I'm going through and hooking up my child presenters, my header presenter, main presenter, footer presenter, and putting them into the view. And then I've got a little bit of logic down here, which we'll talk about later, but is basically watching the model and hiding certain parts of the view when we don't have any to-dos. So the app presenter has an app presenter test, which looks like this. I'll go ahead and run it. And it runs nice and quick, 0.25 seconds, which makes the new presenter. I've got this app state notion, which I don't usually do if worked out for this, that kind of has all of the to-dos. And you'll notice that when we get the view from the presenter, we cast it to the stub app view. And the stub app view, if we go look at it, was also generated for us by Tessell. And it's going to have fields for all of my UI fields, but instead of real widgets or real elements, it has stub widgets and stub elements. And all of these are provided by Tessell out of the box. I'm pretty sure they're there for most all GUID widgets. I add them like as I need them, so widgets that I haven't used, I guess, are not there, but there are a lot of them by now. And so obviously these are stubs, right? So the elements, they're not, they have no notion of being rendered or where they are. There's a little bit of stuff, we set up a little bit of a hierarchy. I wonder if this may not be in this one because most of these are elements. The stubs do actually set up the widget hierarchy, but they don't do it for elements. There's also this ensure debug ID. I guess for stubs that's not as interesting, but the GUID one has it too. So like, for Selenium testing or whatnot, you automatically have your IDs. But yeah, so the idea is that there's stubs, and so when I go back to my test, I have, you can do things like, let me get back to the test. So the elements, they don't know, they are stubs, but they know basic things about themselves, like what their style is, what their attributes are, am I shown or am I hidden, because you can look at this, the CSS values. Tessell has a few sort of the hand press matchers, right? This is hidden and is shown. Is just helper methods that look at the CSS for whether there's a display none or not. And so this is the basic workflow. of updating an app UI XML and then being able to present it or to test it. We can also look at another one. We'll look at one more before kind of looking at the do one. There's a main UI XML file, which is there we go. So down here, this is the kind of the section of the to-do app that like lists all of the to-dos, right? So whether there's 1, 2, 3, or 4, there's going to be n of them. And what controls that is this HTML panel on the bottom. So we've got a check all, a toggle all, and then a label that mark as complete. And then we're going to have a UL tag, and it's basically that for every to-do we want a new item in our UL tag, right? And the way we do that is inside of main presenter. We can use our binder DSL that watches our state.all-to-dos list, and it's going to do a two-way binding to this. Let me move the mouse. To basically, every time there's a to-do added or removed to that list, it's going to invoke this little list presenter factory and make a new presenter, and then bind that presenter to that model object and put it into the view. So any other part of the app just has to do is make a new to-do, drop it into the list, and the UI sort of auto updates. I was going to do this at the end, but we can go ahead and look at this app state. So it is. Sorry. There we go. So the app state, the main list, the main thing in the app state is that we have this list property of all to-dos. The list property, it really is just a list, except for it has change events, right? It watches what happens to it, and it fires add, value added, value removed, and value changed. And the interesting thing is we can have filters on it. Like we'll see this later, is that we can look at all to-dos, and we want to filter them by who is done. And we get our list of done to-dos, and we use this to say, like, how many are done, how many are left in UI. And this will auto-update every time all to-dos changes, right? So anytime all to-dos changes, the filters rerun. And also anytime this to-do.done changes. So anytime somebody clicks the little done in the UI and it goes from done true to done false, it basically re-evals the filter for the done to-dos. We also do the same sort of thing. Number left gets bound in the UI, where this is a derived value. We say it's an integer, but it's the number of all of them minus the number of done of them is the number left. And again, Tessell has some magic that anytime you're doing a derived value, it knows to basically watch what you're touching inside of here. So number left will get updated automatically either time any of these changes, or whatever. You could have an arbitrary sort of expression in here, right, that touches a bunch of other models. And it can basically tell what models you have touched, and sets you up as derived on them. So that's the app state. Questions so far?
Can you show one of the interfaces like this text box?
Yeah, right. So this text box is in Tessell. And I basically very much mirrored the widget API, where every single widget has an is interface that has all of the methods on it. And this can actually be really handy. So, characteristic interfaces are great, but not every method is covered by a characteristic interface, characteristic interface. These is interfaces really do have everything. And they also do have the characteristic, like the has direction. So if you have methods that do want has direction or has text or has whatever, it implements those too. We can take a look at the stub text box. Stub text box base might be more interesting. But it just pretends to be a text box.
What would be keeping us from actually pulling them into proper grid? Because I've done mostly the same thing for
I know. I think that would be a good idea. I've had that conversation twice over the last 2 years, and it's just never really, happened yet, I guess. I think it's fine. The most annoying thing would be, it depends on how anal you want to be about documentation, right? So it's like when I have is text box, I didn't go through and add Java docs for all of these, where, if you want to be really sort of, proper about it, you would have to go through text box and copy paste over all of the docs to the is interfaces. Other than that, I think it's like change the package and like they don't depend on anything in Tessell. It's not like they're just interfaces, right? I'm not calling internal Tessell stuff or anything like that. So yeah, I actually think they would be very valuable. And not only that, but I have to do some ugly stuff. Perhaps this is somewhat of a tangent, but this GWT text. Oh no, it's just text box, but it's the org.tessell text box. Because UI binder still wants a text box, I basically have to subclass all of the GWT classes to add. By the way, they also implement this interface, right? Because I can't go into text. I didn't fork GWT and go into text box and say, by the way, you implement text box. So I have a subclass of all of the GWT widgets that says, by the way, I implement this interface, right? So I could stop doing this if the interfaces got into GWT proper, which would be awesome. So yeah, and I have an is element. For the element, I don't try and do anything too fancy. I'm not going to do any sort of browser sort of logic. They technically have offset width and all of this stuff, but they're just dummy values that you can set. So it's actually pretty handy. Because if you think about doing some mouse over logic, if you want to test that, it's actually pretty hard to get like Selenium to do the the boundary cases of when X is this and Y is that, or offset is this, right? But with a stub element, you can just say that, okay, look, I know that this boundary case is going to be when X is larger than Y, and just set that in your text in your test, and then run the test over the stub element, and it's really pretty nice to test boundary cases like that. The stub element, I think, just has a few.
Does anybody think that's not a good idea to do?
So we had a discussion on the email. So my 3 points are we can do that, but there are 2 issues. One issue is you need to think about instead of going and making current interface as the reference interface. So this is going to be a reference interface. So this is going to can be also implemented by other wrappers that we implemented. So we want to go and
so what you're saying is not add interfaces for the widgets they are today. You want interfaces for like some ideal set of widgets that is like better.
Yes.
And not legacy or something. And I can.
That's one part.
That's what. Yeah.
The other part is are we still want this stuff to be derived from these widgets? So currently, our widgets abstraction is based on widgets, and we might want to change it in one part. As we have a real widget concept inside the DOM, then the abstraction for widgets also going to be an element.
Yeah.
So
I think that's an interesting discussion. Yeah.
That's another thing. So my 2 concerns are like this. So if we can solve these problems, and then I don't see any.
Yeah. I have some other stuff.
Unfortunately, need some time to see the future.
Yeah. Well, I have some other stuff I want to show. Otherwise, we might come back to that at the end. So this is. So this is the main thing. One of the main things. The first main thing Tessell does is generation of this stuff and providing the stubs and all of that out of the box. So the other thing is this binder DSL, which, if we look at like this to do UI XML file. So this to do UI XML. This is. When you see it, it's going to be, it's what's repeated for every to-do on the screen, right? So there could be 3 or 4 or 5 of them. Maybe you can envision it in your head. It will make sense. Yeah, I don't know.
Like last time you removed focus and came back.
Or should I like, yeah, trick it somehow?
Maybe restart sharing these screens.
Yeah, but the guest is not. I mean,
Well, it seemed to work most of the time. The
But I had
Wi-Fi
I
was
had the
really
same
slow.
problem yesterday and I was on Google A. So I don't know.
but it wasn't that slow for you.
It was that
it
slow.
was like 3-4 seconds. This is like a minute.
Yeah, well, yeah, this is extremely painful.
But you had something else where it came back.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can switch over to my browser and see if that. Like, yeah, I'm in the Hangout now.
I wonder, like, did you get back into the come on?
No, I can try that.
Let's come out.
Yeah.
No, I just see, like even loading Gmail is taking. Yeah, yeah.
You can just put Google Glass on you and let you share the screen that way.
No, I think you're right. But
No, you can't even get to Google Mail, right? Google Guest itself is slow.
No, if we can mirror the
Yeah,
camera, then I
but-
can use.
Yeah, I have to check the help. Maybe you have GVT. See if you can.
Yeah, I have no problems with Google Guest at the moment.
I can try disconnecting and getting back on.
Yeah, let's try that.
That can. Okay, looks like it might be a little bit. Come on, Gina. Okay, I'm trying to get into the Hangout again. It says I am the first one here. Is that true?
No, did you get the right number?
surprisingly good camera. Here.
Did you get the right link?
I just missed it.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just. You muted Stefan Haberman. I think that's better.
Still seems to be as slow as it was before. I've switched over to my other. Okay. Well, we can see if this is better, I guess.
Okay.
It's flashing.
Okay, so we'll see. So anyway, so this is the to-do that's repeated for each one, and you can see it's an li tag that's for each UL, or there's one UL and multiple li tags. And so this is where kind of a lot of the stuff happens of when you want to double-click on the label, we want to switch from the edit view to or the viewing view to the editing view, and there's an edit box and the destroying all of this. So I've got a to-do presenter for this. That is this one. And yeah, so most of the logic is aha. Okay, that's not too bad. So Tessell has this binder DSL, which is basically tries to do a lot of the logic you do with the UI without inner classes, right? The idea is that since we've got these models and these properties that you can pass around and the binder DSL can watch, you can bind them to your view, and it'll do one way or two way based on what you bind on. So I'm passed a to-do, and I'm going to bind its name to the text of my label. There's a requirement that whenever the to-do name changes to null, I want to remove the to-do from my list. bind the to-do done to the checkbox. So whenever the checkbox checks, it updates the done. And whenever the done is true, add this. Sorry, add this. This we were on the. Whenever the to-do is true, add this completed. BS is the base style. So there's a base.css that comes with the to-do application. So completed is just a class, the CSS class name from there. Which Tessell will also, it's in the GWT code base actually, but Tessell just runs it automatically. It looks at the CSS files and makes the style class promise. So anytime you change your CSS file, it will generate one. And then it also has this idea of on double click of the label set editing to true. So this is what editing is. I'm not going to scroll to it, but it's a field up at the top. That's just a Boolean property of am I in edit mode or not, true false. So when they double click on the label, switch to the editing mode, and also when they double click, focus on the text box. The focus also does the right little thing of making sure you're attached, and if not, set a timeout to wait until it's attached. And then just some more sort of logic of when we are editing. Oh right. Yes. Whenever we go from editing false to true, we want to reset what our edit box is. This is slightly different. Usually, what you'll do is you'll bind your model directly to the text box, which is what I started out doing. But you don't want that for they don't want this for that application because they want to be able to hit escape and cancel the editing of the text box. So you actually end up having two values. You have like your canonical, this is what the save value is, and the to-do.name, and then you really do kind of leave the value in the text box alone, and you don't bind it directly until they hit enter and like save. Enter is like hitting the save button. So
I have a question about that. So
yeah,
that's similar problem is also true for in the larger scale. Like if I have a UI where I have a contact and I want to have save cancel buttons.
Yeah. Well, so usually the way it works is that you'll have a form that is your contact, and usually you'll have like a copy of the contact, right? And so you can update the contact model directly, whenever they change the text field. So that's usually what you want to do because usually you want it to update right away because you want to rerun validation rules against your model and whatnot. And for most of the apps I've done, I haven't had like a local client's, store of clients anyway. I've got like a copy of the client from the server. And so it's fine to go ahead and modify the name right away.
You have a DTO?
Yeah, there's a client, yeah.
What about your DTO to this?
To the model thingy?
To the model.
I have a code generator for that too. It's not technically in Tessell, it's in this other project, Detonator, that you write a YAML file that describes your DTOs of like, I've got a client DTO that has a name and whatever, and it'll generate the DTO for you. Detonator started out to be, it would generate the DTOs, but then it would also look at your domain objects on the back end and generate a mapping file, a mapper to go between the two from the domain object to the DTO is its main job. And it does that very generically, so you can use it for other sort of frameworks too. But I got to realizing that it knows so much about the DTOs that you can also put in a little flag that, by the way, make a model for this DTO. And while it's generating the DTO, which is this is serializable sort of thing, that it's just nice to be able to make a DTO with one line and like a list of properties instead of the fields and the getters and setters and its main job is to do the mapping anyway. So while Detonator is making the DTO, it will also make this model, and so the model will wrap the DTO, and and then you send the DTO back and forth to the server. That's it works out really well. I'm not going to say it's like the way to use Tessell or anything like this. This is kind of the whole. It's not Misaki or whatever. It's like you can use it, I really like how it works, but. Yeah, I don't have like a canonical way of this is how you should do your models with these DTOs sort of thing. So normally yes, you have a copy of the model and you're gonna modify it directly as the user is editing the fields, and then when they're done, they click save and you run the validation rules, and as long as everything's fine, you send it to the server. So this is slightly different, this little app, because we're not sending it to the server, and this to-do is more like the canonical to-do. So it's a little different. So there's a few other things of, on key down, when they hit escape, we want to back out of editing mode. And this is where we kind of forget about the values that they've been doing. When they hit enter, we want to do the save new value, which you'll see down here is a little runnable. I made it a runnable because we do it in two places. If they hit enter, and then also if they blur out of the text box, we treat that the same thing. Same way, clicking the destroy button removes the to-do from the all to-dos. And the runnable is, we'll see how fast that happens. It's just a small little thing that goes to the edit box and gets the new value and sets it into the to-do. So I think this was most, and so we'll see if it eventually shows you what this little runnable is. I also wanted to show what the to-do presenter test looks like. Maybe the runnable's not that interesting, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the test. Oh, yeah, okay. See it quick because it's going to change. Actually, you have a little while before where it gets the value and sets the thing. Okay, so this is what a test will look like. So, and there's a lot of these, but what I like about them is they almost read like Selenium tests. I mean, it's like go click this label, go double click this, go set that sort of thing. So here, we want the edit box content is set correctly. So this means anytime that they double click the label, we want to make sure that the edit box, has the latest, the right value in it. It gets copied from the model. We go ahead and test it. Okay, they double clicked, which means they're editing. So then they add a 2 to the, they press 2, and then they press enter. It makes sure that, so over on the presenter side, this is running, the key down events and all of this. So now we see that our model is a new value, and this is also just testing that the model, got bound to the DOM, so the view, the read-only value got updated. All of these are a lot the same. I don't have to step through all of them. And yeah, that the checkbox changes the model. It goes from, and you check the checkbox and it goes to true. We test the blur, changes the model to, and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think this is about all I wanted to show anyway. I can definitely go poke around at other things if people have questions or want to see certain things. But that's the gist of it.
Questions? Code generation is it's not a good generator.
No, yeah, the code generation is not a GWT generator because it runs on save in Eclipse, right? So Eclipse has this crazy thing. I haven't. I might write Eclipse plugin someday, but I haven't yet. Where you can set up these external builders, and it might take you a while to get to it. But there's basically a way in Eclipse to, just like it has the Java builder, you can set up your own program that it's just a system execution, and you say, well, I want to call Java, and here's my class path that has the code generator on it. And what's really cool is you can tell it to only run, it'll run it on save, but you can tell it to only run on a subset of the directories in your project. So Tessell has a little funny way that the presenters are in one directory and the views are in another directory. Whereas I would kind of prefer them to be in the same directory, but I have to do this because I can have Eclipse watch the views directory, and it means the code generator runs whenever I change a UI. I'm an XML file, but not a presenter.java file, right? And you can also tell it that as soon as it's run this, oh yeah, so here, it looks kind of crazy because I really am just calling Java, and you have to set up the class path. This looks a little weird because I run Tessell locally, so I'm pointing to my own copy of Tessell in Eclipse instead of just the jar file. So my class path is a little longer. But then I just say, yeah, run my generator, and the input directory is this, output to there, and here's where what packages to put the views and the resources in. And so Eclipse will run this automatically, and then it will. You can also tell it to refresh explicitly what directories to refresh when it's done. So it is really quick. Like well, I mean, you didn't get to see it, but it really is sort of like you hit save over here, and the file over here is updated. And one of the only cons about it is that because I run up front, I don't have access to type information that is in the user program itself, right? Like if you've written a widget, I can't use reflection to get to it because it hasn't been compiled yet, right? Like maybe Eclipse has, because Eclipse has this iterative cycle, but you always code generation. You always have to think of the command line build, right? That is always sequential, unfortunately, which really sucks. But it's going to be that Tessell has to run first, and then the Java C has to run next. And so I have to do a few hacks in a few places to, because of the fact that I can't use reflection to see all of the type information yet. But other than that, it works out really well. And most of the type information is in the GWT UI XML file, which is just kind of magically, serendipitously awesome. Yeah.
You just parse UI XML, like.
Yeah. I love that UI XML files are XML, right? I mean, I know HTML can be parsed too, but it's the fact that UI XML files are actual UI, XML with actual namespaces and all this other stuff actually is really nice to me, because it lends itself to code generation really well.
Is it like you cannot change your views by hand? It's always generated. So
right, you cannot change your views by hand. That is a good thing. It means that that GWT app view or the GWT to-do view, you can't change it. It gets it overwritten every time by hand, and so anything that you want to do has to be in your presenter, right? Like it just has to be, which is great because for one, it means basically it means that it can be tested, right? That whatever your presenter does, I can see in the JRE test now.
There's some truth. I mean, sometimes you hit animation and other stuff. You don't know.
That's true. So this is like the 95%, 90% sort of stuff that's business logic-y, right? So yeah, I mean, if you want to test, especially animations, or like overlapping of DOM rendering, whatever, yeah, you're gonna have to use Selenium or GWT test case or something. Yeah, this is not going to be every single testing project, but I think it should be most of them, right? At least for the projects we have, it's hundreds of these versus like tens of Selenium tests. And the Selenium tests are fine, but it's more like the Selenium test is, okay, the page loads and hasn't blown up on the very happy case. And then the presenter cases are like, okay, the 20, 30 boundary cases, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
So what do you use for, perhaps mention, or what, you just screen builder, or how do you do the code generation?
Oh, yeah, I can show you. So here's the, right. Maybe I can show you.
Great solution.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we should go faster than that.
Yeah. I saw Microsoft building on the way in. They might have better Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Okay.
I kind of want to show it. I have a way I do like doing code generation because I do a lot of it.
I think you left the Hangout.
Did I left? Yeah, this is not even like it's on the old one. Oh, the Hangout ended because the connection was lost.
Oh.
That's how bad it was. Okay, well, I should be able, let me try to reconnect again.
Yeah.
Maybe like a 55% something, whatever that means. Is that like 55% packet loss or 40%?
So bad for mine. It's working for others, right?
Maybe
I have no
my
problems at all.
laptop sucks, I guess.
Well, acid, right?
I'm going through that.
See, it seems to be fast for a little while. Okay, so I'm muted.
Now it's fast.
Okay, screen share, desktop, share, 1. Okay. Aha, okay, so here's the code that generates that is, the is view interface. So like I was changing the app.uixml, and this is for like the is app UIXML. So I've got this is view, which it's a G class. It's like a generated class, right? And so I've got methods on it to say, like, by the way, your base class is going to be is widget. By the way, you're an interface. So then I parse, this handler is the code that I get back from parsing the UIXML file. So go over all of the fields, like the UI with fields, and I'm going to add a method that is this name and this return type.
So like what Ferry is doing? So this
I don't know how it works.
What's that?
Like the code generation. So how you build some meta model and then
Yeah, Rye has a intermediate meta model of the entire code generation story that it does. So yeah.
That sounds similar. Yeah, this is the classes and the methods that you want to generate. It gets down to so I'm adding fields and adding methods, and then at the very end you just call toCode, right? And it does a toString on all of the methods and all of the fields you've added, and formats them correctly and puts the parens in the right spot. It only does types and methods. I don't have like an if, or a while or something like that.
Yeah, our stuff has all that, like the control flow stuff. It also has a thing called literalization, which allows us to like say we can like pass in a instance of an interface and it will literalize it. So it'll implement a version of that interface that like returns like static implementations of the actual values of that implementation. So we have things like that which are pretty handy.
So yeah, I haven't found the need to go into the if and the while and all that, only because like when I'm doing code generation, I try and not generate a lot of code. Like the bodies, like if I do a body, I'll scroll down and here's like the GUID. Let's find where I'm doing a body somewhere. Yeah, like here's a constructor body line. Well, you'll see it eventually. But it basically gives you a string builder of, add this line, add this line, add this line to the method. But I don't like to ever have more than like 3 to 4 to 5 lines of code, in my generated method bodies. Otherwise, it just gets too hard, right? It's too much magic. I think code generation works really well to like basically generate the skeleton of types that you need to satisfy a type-safe language, right? Like dynamic languages don't do a lot of code generation because they just call it and it magically sort of works, right? Static type, you need the types, but I don't think you should be generating like logic in your generated code. It should just be kind of the skeleton that then calls into some sort of library that does the actual logic. It still hasn't updated, but yeah. Anyway, the method bodies are just string builders that get put in the right place, and indentation I think is the only formatting it does. It does do some auto importing sort of stuff. So like for this return type, I'm passing the full com, Google, whatever type. But when it does toCode, it will go through all of the types and say, well, if nobody's imported widget yet, go ahead and truncate this down from the full one to the just widget and add an import statement for it. So you don't, which is also really nice because all of the import statements are handled for you, so you don't get these warnings of, oh, unused import, because, which I think you run into in templating approaches, because with the template you're like, oh, fuck it, I'll just put all of the imports that I've ever used there. Whereas this is more dynamic about which boundary cases you actually hit.
So we use like Eclipse's organized imports.
No, I wrote something that pretends to do it. When it's outputting the code, it basically does that.
So if I understood correctly, code generation happens every time you save the file and oops.
Yes.
How well does that integrate?
I don't know. I have not used it.
Okay.
It would depend on whether IntelliJ has some sort of hook to anytime a change happens in this directory, do something, right? IntelliJ sounds awesome. I would have to imagine there's some sort of way to do some sort of build every time somebody saves something, save something, do this. Kind of the only thing that would, and I would I maybe assume, I don't know, you'd have to have it. It would have to be like, you don't want to do it anytime any file in your project changes. You want to scope it to only this directory. That being said, I've been really tempted to write an Eclipse plugin, which I'm trying to say you could probably write an IntelliJ plugin, like a real plugin. I'm kind of abusing Eclipse's little, set up a command line to do this, because I've been too lazy to write a plugin. But kicking up the code generator is really easy. It's because this command line is doing it. It's just calling static void main, right? So you could pretty easily have a plugin that, even an Eclipse plugin, I played very, very little with Eclipse plugins, and I think usually they probably get hard and stuff. But even an Eclipse plugin to do this, I think, would be fairly interesting, or trivial. So you could look into that. It also very much has to work for command line builds, right? So it's not at all tied to Eclipse. But admittedly, that's the only experience I've optimized for. Yeah, it would be really cool to see. But yeah, I haven't looked into it. It does do a few tricks with like caching stuff. So it doesn't parse every single UI XML file every time, right? So it'll look at timestamps of what has changed. And precisely because Eclipse is running it as a brand new system command every single time, it doesn't have state like a plugin would. So it does a few hacks to still be fast. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks, guys.